ReZero and solo leveling may be over, but Aninews ain't. He promised that he would cover more ReZero content, and here it is. You got Regulus's invincibility powers explained and how Subaru beat it. At this point, I think we're pretty familiar with how that shit works, right? The pause stasis-like state and him being able to, you know, basically whatever he touches, whatever, you know, he represents to be in this, like, invincible paused iframe state that can just, like, destroy anything. But hey, let's see what he has to say about this.
The true nature of Regulus's power is being able to press pause in the middle of a video game. This was what Subaru said to Regulus the moment he figured it out, and as accurate as it was to describe it like that, Regulus had no idea what any of it meant. Subaru would then call it Lionheart instead, which, put simply, lets him stop time for his physical body. It was a conclusion that stemmed from the connection between the Archbishop's names and the names of the stars that Subaru knew.
Imagine getting beaten by a horoscope boy. You know how people make fun of girls for, like, you know, depending so much on horoscopes and like, oh, what constellation, you know, what is this? And they got like different characteristics. They're like, oh, you're a Leo. Oh, you're an Aquarius. But like here, this shit actually matters somehow. Somehow the constellations actually matter. And it can be utilized to beat these isekai characters. And the saddest thing is, they themselves don't even know what these constellations are because these same stars don't exist here.
Such a fact wasn't something Subaru was a fan of though, since with the name derived from the stars himself, he had always considered the stars kind of like siblings.
The uniter.
So, for the most wretched people he'd met to share that same lineage, well, that to him was the ultimate humiliation. It made him furious at whoever decided to name them that way.
Pandora?
Now, we already know the word-based paths Subaru followed to figure out Regulus's power, but the steps before were just as important too. With every plan serving as a different means to figuring out his invincibility, eventually Subaru would learn it was
Plan B balls. Balls vitals. Watergrave own goal armpits?
serving as a different means to figuring out his invincibility. Eventually Subaru would learn it wasn't invincibility at all. If it was, then him and Reinhardt would have been able to see through it by now. So, it was after that rigorous process of ruling out various possibilities, combined with Amelia's recollection and Subaru's connection to Lionheart, that only one answer would be left to explain all of it. All the patterns Regulus exhibited dictated his powers didn't make him invincible at all. No, what Regulus was doing would be classified as a time stop ability. More specifically, his ability allowed him to stop time for all sorts of objects. This was an answer that seemed so much more obvious the more Subaru thought about it, since when he looked back at the twisted worldview Regulus abided by, the way he lived was clearly a testament to the obscene power gifted to him. Then, with time preventing the change of an object's state, it explained how he could be in water and not get wet, or how he could throw dirt and rocks that would penetrate anything.
He's literally a video game character that is not in the video game, if you know what I mean. Like, all these environments, everything, the dust, air, like his hair, nothing like would impact him, nothing.
Removing time as a property they were affected by essentially turned them into anomalies in space which could pass through anything. So, Subaru would actually go on to describe
Pretty
it
unique
as something
concept.
akin to a vacuum slash ability, since with Regulus effectively being this distortion in space, that would allow him or anything he touches to bypass everything. It didn't matter how strong or durable it was. An object with its time stopped was nothing more than a vacuum to an object with time. It would pass straight through it as if it wasn't even there. To explain this with a practical example we saw in the anime, let's use Krush as our test dummy.
Okay.
Here we saw that Regulus didn't even need dirt. While that
Air.
is one of the more common projectiles he uses, by simply moving he's affecting the air around him, so say he applies his time stop to some of the air he's displacing, that would make it a projectile no different than the dirt.
He could straight up kill people by pissing on them, which is kind of insane. Imagine he pissed and just like basically shot the piss, and the piss just like moved at such fast speeds it just cuts through shit.
Whether it's with the slash of his arms or even a simple blink of his eyes, if he applies time stop to the air he's displacing, that air will then hold the state it was last in and proceed forward indefinitely. So, where for a normal person waving your arm does nothing,
He could also just sneeze, right? He could sneeze and have all the snot and all that spit particles come out, and it would be no different from the dirt particles that would be used to shred people.
Regulus can stop time for the air his arm displaces, have it keep the state of movement it was frozen in, then that in turn results in an unstoppable, unseeable projectile cutting through everything. The same applies for dirt and rocks, and it was even seen applied to Reinhardt. Now, when it comes to stopping...
That's right, the scene on Reinhardt is him just getting launched into the moon, right? Because now Regulus is literally touching Reinhardt, and I guess everything that represents Reinhardt is, you know, basically that time-stopped, absence of time thing, and it's just gonna go infinitely to the moon.
Applied to Reinhardt. Now, when it comes to stopping time for his body, the state he was in pre-time stop is the state he'll be in after. That being the case, it doesn't matter how much wear and tear he takes in between, whatever state he initiated it in is the same state he'll come out in after. It was truly the ultimate ability in terms of both offense and defense.
Bullshit.
With its applications seemingly endless,
The walk
you know
scene,
it's
though.
OP when invincibility is just a mere side effect of it.
That was such a funny scene, bro. Him walking, strutting down, just boom. But it doesn't hurt him, and he doesn't even get wet either.
Side effect of it. So, Subaru pinpointing this had for the first time left Regulus shocked, but it didn't last long as his focus quickly shifted to hunting down Subaru. Now that...
And I have no clue how the hell he survived all that shit. This is probably the biggest, like... If there's any bullshit that happened in ReZero Season 3, it's definitely how Subaru outlasted Regulus's attacks until Reinhardt came back and they figured out his powers. Because in the cut content, it was told that Subaru was basically just like parkouring and maneuvering himself around while taking a lot of damage. Like, he didn't have an easy time, apparently, according to the light novel stuff. But in the anime, bro was just reacting, you know? Bro was just Neo. Bro just like dodged everything, and it's just like, what? Because, you know, in episode 2, or whenever Amelia got abducted, right, by Regulus, Regulus literally just fucking hit the ground, the pebble of rock, decimated Subaru's legs. It was GG. It was that easy. And at that point, it was like, wow, god damn, this guy really is different. But then at this point, it's like, nope. Subaru just became the ultimate reactor.
That Subaru understood the fundamentals of Regulus's power, though, he could easily navigate the chase in a way that actually manipulated Regulus. You see, with Regulus being the novice he was, a simple taunt was all it took to make him engage head-on. Subaru had cleverly placed himself behind a hole though, so the moment Regulus's footing reached said hole, he would instantly fall without a means to save himself.
Okay.
Had it been a pitfall or some type of covered trap, then Regulus would have just used time stop to create a foothold out of it. It's because there was nothing around him other than air though that Regulus would simply fall without being able to stop it. He would have to reach the bottom before he could do anything to make his way out. Subaru would then mock Regulus and flip him off, keeping him occupied as the lesser spirit Amelia gave him continued digging out more holes in the ground.
Okay, wait, the lesser spirit was digging holes? How? I don't know, they're like little pixie fairy dust. Anyways, okay, thank you for digging holes.
Subaru kept mental marks of where each of them were, but for Regulus, who was totally unfocused, navigating the terrain wasn't so easy anymore. He would be much more cautious than he was before. This in turn allowed Subaru to stall for time as long as he wanted, since he could easily dig as many holes as he needed, and Regulus would remain trapped by what was nothing more than undisguised pitfalls.
That's so stupid and silly, but funny at the same time. Holes. We just dug a shitload of holes and it just fell down. That's how we bought time. Yeah. More added context of, you know, how Subaru survived against Regulus, but damn, bro. Lesser spirits digging holes, huh?
It was clear proof Regulus's experience was lacking. He had likely only ever crushed his enemies in a head-on battle, so when confronted with something a bit more prolonged, this was completely new territory for him. It was such an easy workaround that Subaru almost felt bad for Regulus. He felt taking advantage of someone so unskilled was actually making him a worse person.
Damn. It's so one-sided, man. It's crazy how, leading up to this moment, he's such a powerful, mysterious character that just seems invincible no matter what you do. But once you figured out this one little clue, it just becomes like, it feels like we're bullying a toddler.
That's actually the reason he wanted Amelia to leave, since with her being such an honest person, Subaru felt this roundabout way of fighting wouldn't suit her. That said, the only weak point in a strategy like this was that the length in which it could go on for depended entirely on Subaru's stamina. Luckily, his bad leg wasn't really hurting, so Subaru knew he could keep going for a while.
Bad leg.
It was as if it was in
God
peak
leg.
form right now.
God leg.
A moment later, Regulus would throw a tantrum befitting his persona, destroying the entire ground and every hole along with it.
Smart.
Subaru would mock Regulus again to prevent him from thinking he'd come out with a victory, then create more distance in a classic display of kiting.
Bro is kiting like an 80 carry in League. For someone who loves blowing up everything that noise, why don't you just do that to begin with? The troll, the taunt.
Distance in a classic display of kiting. As a gamer who knew exactly how to take on powerful bosses like this.
Oh, yo, this is the tutorial boss in Elden Ring. You gotta be so extra sweaty to be able to beat this thing, you know, first pass. Most people probably would never be able to if they're a first-time player, but a veteran could definitely beat this guy. Wonder what happens if you actually beat this guy. It probably nothing changes because you're supposed to, like, you know, this is like you die here and then you spawn.
Subaru was applying his knowledge of kiting in the best way he could. It was the most he'd ever had to use knowledge from his old world. So, this cycle of mocking and kiting would continue endlessly, all while Subaru would avoid both the shelters and Amelia. In fact, there were actually quite a lot of things he was trying to do at once. Not only was he keeping Regulus pinned to one area, but he was also ensuring Amelia had the time she needed, all while avoiding battle in the places where the shelters were. Combine that with trying to keep himself safe too, and what you get is a task that required all his focus. Ultimately, what it all came down to was stalling, and that was the role Subaru committed himself to fulfilling.
Yeah, we're just buying time.
In the meantime, Amelia would be dealing with the wives, but for him, he needed to avoid this city-destroying calamity. Like, with Regulus going through what was essentially a temper tantrum, should Subaru venture to a part of the city they had not been to yet, Regulus would be sure to level it shortly after. Buildings would crumble and foundations shatter, all in pursuit of him. Subaru would keep running and taunting regardless, all because this was the only way to fight Regulus. It was after about 15 minutes that Subaru would finally wind up here, giving Regulus the chance to gloat again. As it was with every battle he fought before, Regulus knew it was always fated to end up like this. He would then call Subaru greedy for wishing for something beyond his ability, then reaffirm his own value of excessive avarice leading to ultimate tragedy.
Greed gave rise to vain conflicts, and desire for possession spawned an endless thirst for more, which simply led to the ultimate tragedy. His own greed and hunger led to his own demise. How poetic.
As the embodiment of greed himself, he truly thought lack of desire was the most precious thing that any person could have. This obviously wasn't the way he himself lived, but he certainly went to great efforts to enforce it onto others.
What a hypocrite.
So, as he genuinely pitied Subaru for his grave mistake, he would convey one last time the message that one should be content within themselves. Okay. To him, a man's reach should never extend further than his grasp. Regulus would then
basically, don't get too close to the sun, stay in your own lane.
Ask of Amelia's whereabouts, reveal his bride's connections to his authority, then speak of how entrusting them with his heart was the ultimate expression of love for them. This was, as we saw, part of Subaru's bait to get Regulus to monologue, so that in turn would lead to more predictable attacks from him. He would charge.
We just want to activate his monologue, and it's actually like perfect. This guy is the easiest person to stall if you know how his power works, because he's gonna start yapping. Every time he starts monologuing, it's like perfect. We got a cutscene. Now we're buying like extra time.
Forward with a burst of speed not typical to what he displayed before, showing power which stemmed from freezing time on himself. You see, by preventing all physical phenomena from interacting with him, Regulus was free from the forces of gravity, air resistance, and every aspect of the conservation of momentum.
Bros defying laws of physics.
This translated to incredible speed and power, but also made it so he could only attack in one direction.
Yo, that scene is pretty intense though, right? This scene is very important because Regulus, right? What was this? This basically proved that the dragon sword is fundamentally different. It exists in a different category of otherworldly things because of Regulus and what his powers, represent. This shouldn't be happening unless, again, this sword, right, this legendary class of categories, different weapons and tools are fundamentally different.
The attack
different as in it's not even from this world, right? That's the idea, right?
In one direction. Whichever direction he committed to when time was stopped is the same direction he would continue until it wasn't. So In the hands of someone more skilled, this would certainly be deadly, but for someone like Regulus, he could barely control it at all. It made dodging his attacks extremely easy. So much so that Subaru could continue his chase even longer now. Eventually, Subaru would see the pillar of ice forming in the distance, symbolizing the choice he himself knew he'd never be able to make. Even if he knew killing the wives was the only way to kill Regulus, actually doing so wasn't something Subaru felt he could follow through with.
Yo, he straight up thought that Amelia killed them all, right? There was a misunderstanding there until Amelia had to explain.
So, to see what he could only assume was Amelia doing just that, well, that was something he truly felt would have been unimaginable for her.
He was like, what? Are you serious? You killed him?
Now,
yeah, honestly, this is not too far off from, you know, ReZero Toma versus Accelerator, right? Because Accelerator's powers is very similar to Regulus's powers, right? The vector control, it's not the same, but in a first glance, it would seem like it. And Subaru seemingly has no powers. We know he does. It's just non-conventional. And Toma, you know, he does have powers. It's just, you know, just non-conventional. So I think it's a pretty good comparison.
It was when even that didn't work that, aside from the numerous contradictions Regulus would spew by calling Amelia a mass murderer, Subaru would also review where he might have gone wrong. After entangling so closely with Regulus for the past 12 minutes, he felt he had pretty good insight into his intelligence and vocabulary now. So, it's because of that Subaru knew Regulus didn't have it in him to trick others like the way it seemed. He knew Regulus wasn't capable of bluffing about his powers like that. With the limits of his understanding only extending as far as himself, the understanding of others required to effectively deceive simply wasn't within his capabilities. It's for that reason this whole turn of events was so confusing.
Subaru outwitted him, big-brained him. You can't manipulate, you can't outgrow me, I'm too smart for you.
Greed's authority should have been figured out for sure now. Turns out there was one wife left, and though the ceremony was never formalized, it was apparent that marriage was just a formality. You see, so long as Regulus considered someone his wife, they would be inducted into his little kingdom regardless of consent.
That's bullshit. As long as you consider somebody? Couldn't Regulus have considered Subaru to be his wife then? That let me cook. Yeah, that sounds ridiculous, I know, but like, if it's that simple of just like a little mental switch that you're my wife, then you can place the heart in, you know? When Amelia's like maybe Regulus should have thought that Reinhardt and Subaru were also his wife. He could have then transported the hearts that way. Anyways.
This meant that despite all Regulus had said about her, Amelia was still someone he considered his. And now that all his other wives were gone, Regulus insisted she remain until he found some new wives. To him, it was her responsibility to fill that gap now. When the only option left was for Amelia to die herself, this was a choice Subaru could never make. He could certainly convince himself sacrificing all the other wives was necessary, but never when it came to Amelia. It was a selfish truth Subaru was more than aware of. It's not like that's something that we can fault him for, though, since it was only natural that those closest to him would be the most precious.
That's right.
Just like everyone else, Subaru didn't value all lives equally.
Of course not. He said it himself, right? Amelia is my wife. I wonder what his tier list is. What the priority is in this, you know, war room of which lives matter the most to him. I bet Felix's is at the very bottom.
Subaru didn't value all lives equally.
Nah, Subaru doesn't hate Felix. Natsuki Tape. Nagatsuki Tape, he hates Felix in the way that he's represented. No, Felix is a homie. Felix saved us, and there was like cute little fan service scenes in season 1 too. I don't think Subaru hates him at all. Otto's a best friend. What else is who? Heinkel. Heinkel's definitely at the bottom, right?
Amelia was, however, capable of making that choice herself, but with Subaru determined to prevent her.
Thank you, NexoKM, for the sub. That's a difficult name, but I appreciate it. Thank you.
From doing so, the only option left after was defeat. With no other means of changing the situation, Regulus would be the only person left with control here. So, after seeing that victory was his for the taking, Regulus would accept Amelia as his temporary wife, then state his intent to kill Subaru as punishment. Any person who infringed on his rights as much as he did, well, let's just say Regulus wasn't a fan of them. Now, Emilia channeling her mana here was her prepping to end things herself, up until Subaru would reveal his own intentions. Regulus would just stand there and let it happen, since to him victory was 100% certain now. He knew Subaru had no paths left available to him, so this was just an extra show adding to his sense of satisfaction. It was when Subaru unveiled his unseen hand next that a voice without sound could be felt cheering from within.
Betelgeuse?
As much as he hated the idea that Betelgeuse was somehow living inside him, there was—
I love that, bro. Thank God Juice is still around. It's great. One of my favorite characters in ReZero, no matter what he did, what a compelling character, and now he basically lives through the sloth factor within Subaru.
Without a doubt, an incomprehensible mixture of emotions not his own. It was as if the power itself was cheering for being awakened, like a deep desire to be wanted was just fulfilled. Subaru knew these emotions weren't his own, so the only other facet which could explain it was the witch factor. He believed it was expressing gratitude for being called to service again.
Okay.
Now,
like he's happy that he's able to work for Subaru, who Satella favors. Yo, ain't this some next level cuckoldry happening right now? Like in season 1, Juice is already so upset that Subaru was the chosen one, right? And Satella basically slapped him away, and bro had to basically just like live with it. But now he's like, oh, let me like service you. Let me help you who is beloved by the chosen one. Anyways, ripping right now.
Activating it was something he'd done a few times before, but actually controlling it was entirely different. This and navigating Emilia's heart were two things he'd never done before. Combine this with the fact any mistake could prove fatal, and Subaru knew this was a gamble more stacked against him. Either way, he still wanted to see if it could be used to save lives regardless.
I low-key forgot about this scene, man. This is one of the best scenes in ReZero Season 3. Like, Kurgan versus Garfield, again, is definitely like the peak of the peak in animation caliber, but like, the story themes and what this moment represents for Juice and Emilia getting closure, you know, over quote-unquote dad, right? And Subaru being able to like save somebody, like, this was a really great episode. I just forgot about it because we were clowning on Regulus so hard.
As a power previously used to take lives, Subaru was now seeing firsthand whether its applications were truly limited to that. That's when Emilia would say she trusts both of them, certainly confusing Subaru as to who else she might have been talking about, but also instilling confidence since she spoke as if she was certain the hand would never harm her.
The both of you right now is Juice and Subaru, or Subaru and Satella? Not sure.
So, one squeeze was all it took for Regulus's heart to be removed, leaving him vulnerable to every attack now. Much of this satisfying sequence was exactly as we saw in the anime, but to give reason to Regulus's begging here, it was simply because he couldn't fathom trying to win without first having a significant advantage.
What a bullshit character. Now he's complaining about like, oh, this isn't fair. Bro, it was never fair. You had the most stupid, ridiculous power, now you're gonna complain about it? Fuck you.
As soon as things started looking a little tough for him, Subaru knew Regulus was the type to give up without first exploring what other options were available to him. That being the case, for him to beg for a 1v1 here, all this was him trying to reclaim some
1v1.
sort of advantage. It was a truly pathetic sight considering he still possessed one of the most powerful abilities in the world. Fast forward to when Reinhardt returned for the cleanup, and Regulus's inner thoughts during his airtime went on much longer than what we saw in the anime. First, he would go into his past, describing the family he detested.
He gave an entire, like, you know how people's like lives like flash before their eyes before they die? Bro is literally narrating that flashback though. He's giving his entire life backstory, but commentating it.
Then talking about how he killed them.
1 second, audio issue. 3, 2, 1, let's go.
Describing the family he detested, then talking about how he killed them. Gaining his witch factor granted him powers he didn't have before, so first he used it to kill his family, then he used it to kill the village that looked at him with contempt, then he used it to kill everyone in the town which forced him to live such a worthless life, then he used it to destroy the country which allowed such towns and villages to exist.
Dude, he's the biggest Karen. Like, he straight up lived a decent life. He didn't have a sad backstory. Like, this is the equivalent of, like, did you know that the average demographic of like a gangster like people who join gangs and deal drugs and just like steal and rob and point guns at people. You know what their backgrounds are? It's not those who had to resort to such things because they lived in poverty, but like modern day gangsters, they're straight up from like suburban families. They're like middle class families that lives in the suburbs, and they just want to like, and they got everything handed down to them. Like mom and dad works nice white collar jobs. You got 2 cars. You got a nice vacation. You have like $1 million house. You got everything, and these kids get so bored. Yeah, this bored kids trying to be edgy, and like, bro, you didn't have a fat sad backstory. This is such like a tier list of backstories. This guy pretty much lived in luxury compared to most, and he still crashed out.
It was once all that was done almost.
Maybe I blame his parents. Maybe I blame his parents for not educating and teaching him proper manners to be this entitled.
A century ago that finally he was able to discover a way of life that best suit him. Fast forward through all that stuff about his wives, and finally we get to the part where he talks about how life was meaningless to him. Romance and love and friendship and trust were all ideals Regulus deemed as pointless.
Why?
To him, love couldn't save anyone, and the idea of understanding one another was just an illusion.
He probably had like, I wonder if he turned into an incel because he got rejected once and he gave up on like the concept of love. I wonder if there's some backstory regarding that.
So, with life being this silly balancing act of consideration and compromise, Regulus to the very end truly believed in the logic he abided by.
What a loser.
And though the anime has him repeating "it's not my fault," in the novel it's actually him repeating "I'm not wrong." Despite everyone else working to prove him otherwise, Regulus still refused to see things any other way than his own.
There is one part of me though that kinda respects him quadrupling down rather than having a moment of realization and be like, I was the one that was wrong, and like, you know what I mean? Like, quite often these kind of stories, the villains are given a reflection of ideologies, and they realize that, oh man, maybe I wasn't the wrong, and they basically can come to terms with their problems, and then they die, right? But there are times when they just double down, they triple down, they quadruple down. They're like, nah, I don't care. And no matter how much of a piece of shit he is, I kind of do enjoy those kind of villains that like die completely still in character, refusing to give up. It's funny to me.
It was after that Regulus would surprisingly plan his counterattack, since though he seemed rather defeated, his humiliation fueled his motivations to get back at them.
Okay.
This led to a plan which would decimate the city in its entirety, since the moment he would start descending, the dirt in his hand could be used as a projectile to wipe out everything.
Pocket sand!
All he needed to do was cast Lionheart for a brief second, then everything below him would be hit with unstoppable projectiles of mass destruction. Fortunately, Reinhardt was there to ride him like a surfboard, sending him plummeting to the earth like a meteor.
That's right.
The depth at which Regulus ended up wasn't due to Reinhardt's power though, but was rather simply the byproduct of using Lionheart on himself. Remember, stopping time on his body allows him to pass through anything. So, had he kept time frozen for the duration...
And the really fucked up thing is, he had to make the conscious decision to stop it right now. Because if he didn't, obviously, he'd probably go all the way to like the center. Well, hold up. Because this is... ReZero world is a flat world. So there probably is still a core, right? It's like a bowl. I'm thinking ReZero's world isn't just like a flat line, obviously, because there's depth to this. I'm thinking it's more like a bowl, like a half of a sphere is what I'm thinking is the ReZero world. Anyways, if he didn't turn this shit off, he would have died due to his powers. But then imagine this. He has to like actively think that if I turn this off right now, all of the pain from the impact of me falling down to the earth is gonna shock him. Like, that is a scary thought. It's just like, oh man, you're really fucked if you do, fucked if you don't.
Of the entire fall, then Regulus would have plummeted straight through to the bottom of the earth itself.
Ugh.
He would have descended to the unknown beyond where even the great waterfall emptied itself. Returning time was certainly an equally dreadful fate too, since meeting the resistance of the ground shattered literally every bone in his body.
Exactly, bro.
The only reason he wasn't instantly turned into a puddle was because his limbs were spread out at the moment of his entry.
Okay.
Instead, his body was just a pile of mush now,
Ugh.
A mishmash of organs, bones, and blood, all in places where they shouldn't be.
Made in Abyss style.
Somehow he was still breathing though, and through it all maintained the simple thought of, had I been serious, you wouldn't have stood a chance.
He's still... Dude, he's still doubling down. I wasn't even trying, bro. Fight me again. Let me be serious, let me lock in.
It was a mindset backed by the singular goal he'd lived his entire life by.
That's crazy.
A 100-year resolve to never let anyone pity him. This led to an attempt to return to the surface where, once he was there, he was now committed to killing everyone. No longer would he make the same mistake he made before, since never again would he let anyone look down on him. This was only possible if he could make it back to the surface though, and that was an arduous crawl only made possible via Lionheart. With that removing the pain for 5 seconds at a time, Regulus could inch his way back to the surface slowly but surely.
Ooh.
Yes, his hands were...
Yo, that was Betelgeuse, like, crawling on the ground after basically his entire, like, flesh and existing, like, husk of a body had got, you know, destroyed. Or look at the way that he, like, positioned himself.
Seconds at a time, Regulus could inch his way back to the surface slowly but surely. Yes, his hands were mangled and fingers gone, but even then he still pushed himself forward. It was then that water would enter to finish the job, but even then Regulus would still prolong it with Lionheart. Sure, it did relieve him of pain and any struggles he had while breathing, but when those 5 seconds were up, the fear of death came creeping ever closer. Keeping Lionheart active only increased the risk of dying from heart failure too, so in this moment where one side was drowning and the other his heart stopping, Regulus alternated between the embrace of 2 deaths. It was a fate he refused to accept no matter how near it drew. In the end, Regulus would have one wish only, and that was for Amelia not to feel anything at all for him. You see, he hated the idea of her rejoicing.
Oh, the laughter, right? Because remember, the thing about all the wives is at the very end, they all laughed at him. They snickered. They got the last laugh, so you don't want that for Amelia too.
His death and starting her life anew, so his final cry was for her to simply forget him. As the one so involved with her mother's death and benefactor's transformation, Regulus wished her to feel zero fulfillment from his demise.
Bruh.
Luckily, that's exactly what happened, since with zero memory of who he was before.
Oh yeah, Amelia forgot, because remember, the trial memories and stuff like that, like, it never, like, all carried over. It's all very hazy.
Or, it turns out, Regulus left not a mark on her at all. But yeah, that's the end to the Archbishop of Greed.
That's pretty much it. And yeah, you think Regulus is a troubled kid that never grown? Kinda. Because, like, he was like a spoiled kid. He had everything given to him. He did not suffer. He wasn't the richest by any means, but he definitely wasn't, like, living like felt in the slums, right? You can't, you know, justify, like, oh, I had lived such a shitty, harsh life. Like, bro, shut the fuck up. You're like a, you know, a kid living in the suburbs who's complaining that you don't get to go on vacation to Mexico 3 times a year compared to 2 times a year. But, like, if you think about it, maybe emotionally, mentally, everything gets stunted, right? Like, there's this idea of Lionheart putting your entire being in stasis, right? That's why his, you know, physical appearance, everything about it never aged. But if you go a layer deeper than that, you could also then say, oh, Lionheart stuff, it literally stunted his emotional development as well, right? Obviously, it doesn't help that having this kind of, you know, overpowered power, him being able to live life in the way he wants and subjecting people into the ways that he wants, you know, doesn't help him have any emotional growth. But, like, there's also that, like, factor of, I wonder if his, like, physiological brain, right? Like, you know how the brain keeps developing until you're, like, whatever, the age? Like that shit all got stunted. Yeah, literally, prefrontal cortex, empathy, all that shit never got, you know, grew. He's literally stuck as, like, an edgy 14-year-old browsing 4chan and trying to write, like, Hitler memes and, like, you know, edgy stuff thinking it's funny. Like, rage baiting on Twitter and stuff like that. Like, straight up. Like, a stupid kid that doesn't even know any better. So is this fault, like, Is it the parents' fault? Did the parents do everything he could? Sometimes, you know, you just get shitty genetics and the kids are just, you know, there's nothing the parents could have done for the kids, you know, to be turned out different.
I hope you enjoyed learning more about what this fight had to offer, and if you want to see more, there's plenty more to come after.
Yeah, more.
Every week will be another ReZero video covering the other fights.
Oh, shit. That's crazy. You know, low-key, big brain moment from Aninews in the sense that, so let's look at this, right? Look at his content strategy. And let's talk about some algorithm stuff for a bit. The smart thing is, and we also missed this one, right? We maybe we should check this one out later on. This is a video from 1 month ago that got posted so later that, you know, we were already so ahead of that fight, and I thought let's just focus on solo leveling. But notice how he only did solo leveling throughout all of winter 2025. And I think that was a smart decision, because remember, like 100K, you know, relative, let's say 450K, that's a big L. Not saying that the video is bad, but if you're talking about YouTube algorithms and performance and stuff like that, you want to stay focused into one topic and ride the hype train. So if you fragmented his audience base during winter 2025 by making content about ReZero, maybe it wouldn't have done as well compared to a situation where he covers all solo leveling and now he can cover all of ReZero on time. I don't know. There's also that like thought process of, since ReZero is not airing right now and you missed out on the trend of season 3 during winter 2025, can you still get ReZero viewership? We'll see, right? I hope it does well. Unfortunate that Tibate, I really wanted more Tibate content, man. I genuinely wanted more Tibate content, but unfortunate. I enjoyed this video, but great videos overall. Thank you for the content, and we got a lot more ReZero content weekly to look forward to. Please check out Aninews' channel. Here's a link to the video. Go give it a like if you want, and I'll see you next time.